Hey guys, Jim Vanosky with Manufacturing Talks. Today's is a critical show. So I just finished an article that I published at Forbes last week about second chance hiring or hiring those who've served a term in prison. And I talked to a man named Lester Young. I had previously talked to him for a similar article a few years ago. And he is an excellent resource because he himself served 22 years in prison and came out and fortunately had an opportunity with Tyson Foods, rehabilitated himself, and now has written 5 books, speaks, holds workshops to help others navigate that. So he's here to tell us all about it. Here on Manufacturing Talks, Lester Young will be with us in just a few seconds. Stay tuned.
Welcome to Manufacturing Talks with Jim Vanosky. Industry has a million cool stories, and Jim talks to the movers and shakers who are making them happen. Let's dive in.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Manufacturing Talks. I'm Jim Vanosky, your host. I am blessed today to be joined by Lester Young. He is an author of 5 books now. He's a speaker. He is the head guy at an outfit called Path to Redemption, and he himself came from prison and established a career in manufacturing and now has moved on and teaches others how that path works and how to make it the best it can be. So welcome, Lester.
Hey, blessings, man. Thank you, Jim, for inviting me to be a guest on this podcast and speak about manufacturing and share my experiences. As you mentioned, my name is Lester Young. I'm a speaker and author, but I'm also a father, a formerly incarcerated person who has served a total of 22 years and 5 months in the South Carolina Department of Correction. I've been released from the prison system for right at now 10 and a half years. And I've been successfully been able to navigate the various challenges that individuals face in every entry space. So I'm looking forward to digging into this conversation some more, Jim.
Well, and beyond what you just said, you've not only navigated it for yourself, but now you're sharing what you learned along the way to make it easier for really both sides, right? The people who are re-entering, as well as those who are looking to provide them with careers and services.
Absolutely. You know, just walking out of prison after when I went to prison at 19 years old, and I was released at 41. Yeah. And, you know, it was the world had done shifted multiple times, and to walk back into a world where when I went in, we were looking at help wanting ads in newspapers for jobs. And now everything was on the computer and searching. And then now I'm into the world searching for employment with a felony conviction. Wasn't even aware of the 48,000 collateral consequences that are tied to a person's felony conviction. And the collateral consequences are just legal barriers that each state has written in law that prohibits a person from moving forward. Not realizing that one of the conditions of my release was employment, but no one prepared me and saying that the chances are you're not going to run into any companies that is going to give you a job or hire you, not because you don't have the skill that they don't need the workforce the service the skills that you're bringing, but is that within their policy they have that we don't hire people with felony convictions regardless of the circumstances. Yeah. So as I said on numerous times that I applied for over 100 jobs and was fortunate to be hired at a few companies that gave me an opportunity and didn't judge me based upon a mistake that I made at 19 years old, but saw me as a person that could add value and be a part of their workforce at the age of 41 at that time.
Well, and that's one of the things I've seen as, you know, it's been several years now that you and I have been in contact. We've done a couple of Forbes articles together. Now I'm glad to have you on the show because it's such an education to learn, you know, for those of us who haven't been involved in the prison system, there's so much to it. We just can't understand. And beyond what you talked about with those legal difficulties, it's just one hurdle after another, even just the basics. I mean, that's what I heard from the people in manufacturing who've engaged in second chance hiring is just the basic stuff like transportation and housing is also difficult, right?
Yeah, because going back again is that, you know, when I tell people when I walked out of prison in 2014, again, I was not even prepared for all of the challenges, right? I knew that I had a plan. I knew I wanted to get out and be successful. I knew I didn't want to come back to prison. But when I walked out of prison, no one prepared me, not even the prison staff, even a lot of the re-entry agencies didn't really have anything in place to really prepare me for those particular challenges that I was going to face. And that really the challenge is that from 19 to 41, I was living in a controlled environment where I didn't even know the size pants that I wore, right? I knew that in prison, they give you uniforms, medium, small, large, extra large, etc. So even walking out, I knew my shoe size, but even walking into a department store to get a pair of pants, I didn't know my shoe size. I didn't know my waist. So I had to like learn all of that again. And all of that just added a whole lot of anxiety to me to be able to now have to navigate this space, which is called re-entry. And then on top of that, now I go into a job space, a workplace, and I have to navigate all of the technology, all of these various things. But I know that I need this job because that is part of my condition of my parole. And I have to pay these fines and fees, and I have to find a place to stay, and also have to feed myself, because in prison you have food, clothes, and shelter given to you. But once you're released, these things are not awarded to you. You know, you have to like now go out and do these things, and you're already like years behind technology, the world, because you've been in this cocoon or this bubble for 10, 15, 20 years, which is the prison environment. So I faced a lot of challenges, and this is another reason why I'm so adamant and an advocate to helping companies understand these challenges, so that not only they say we hire you, but how do we help you acclimate back into the workforce, but also acclimate back into a larger community. But it starts by identifying these various barriers that one face in their transition.
Right. Yeah, I mean, you and I've talked at length a couple of times, and this is the first time I've really even wrapped my mind around that technology challenge. You know, you went in the early 90s?
1992.
So computers were
a beeper and a big computer, right?
Yeah. So I think about, I was like 5 years into the workforce when you were going in, and we were barely using computers. And when you came out, it was technology, everything. I just can't even imagine.
Technology, Jim, just technology. Like I tell people, and I laugh about it now, like to show you how the technology was, it blew my mind and then create. And I'm mentioning these various emotions that comes with that culture shock of after incarceration. Yep. Even like when I went into a fast food restaurant and I made an order because I was overwhelmed with the menu.
Yeah.
Right. I was overwhelmed because in prison you have all of these systems. You know what you're going to eat 7 days a week. Now I'm free. Now I have an opportunity to order something. Don't know what to order. Then once I made this order for this food, they gave me a cup and told me to go to this machine, which now I push the cup under the machine, right, Jim? And now I don't know what to do. Like nothing's coming up, but a bunch of ice is flowing out because I hit this silver button. Yep. But now I don't know what soda to select. And that's just, again, to show you the technology, right? Is that everything was a touch screen. And now I make this transition from the fast food restaurant into the workforce. Now here it is. I use this example that now here I am at Tyson Foods. I need this job at Tyson Foods in order to just get on my feet. And then I got hired to do this job at Tyson Foods. And guess what happened? All of the machines that my job description consist of was about technology. It was a touch screen, this touch screen that. You can't even imagine the mistakes that I made on this machine. Every day I walked into this place with a level of anxiety and panic attack because I know I was going to mess up, but I needed to hold on to this job because if not, there was a chance that I could go back to jail. I didn't have bills. I had bills. I had to pay these fines and fees. So I stayed on this job. But every day it was a challenge for me because of just no one understanding what an individual transitioning out of prison struggle with internally, right, just to keep a job.
Yeah. Now you mentioned Tyson Foods, and that was your first opportunity coming out. How did that come about?
I was able to get a forklift certification when I walked out of prison from an agency. They helped me get a forklift certification. So Tyson at this time, which was located in Columbia, South Carolina, was hiring, and they were looking for forklift drivers. And that opened the door for me to get the job at Tyson Foods. But once I got there, I applied for another job outside of the forklifting certification. But it got me in the door to be able to apply for another job there. But it was because of that forklift certification that it opened up a door for me. And that's another reason why to this day, since I've been able to navigate this space, I now provide forklift certifications for men and women who are coming home from prison. So this is another thing that my organization does, is that I help men and women who are transitioning out to learn how to drive a forklift. So I partner up with local organizations here in Columbia, South Carolina, that we partner up. We provide a 2-day free forklift certification so that can help individuals get into the manufacturing space as a forklift driver. But the uniqueness with it is that now I'm able to share my lived experience as someone entering into the space, so that a person just walking out of prison be better prepared to deal with the different triggers that comes from entering into that workforce.
Yep. Now, Tyson obviously was a godsend for you, and
absolutely,
and God bless them for kind of breaking that box, right?
Yeah.
But they also didn't have the kinds of defined programs around the specific challenges that you faced. So how did you navigate, like you said, you had literally panic attacks over the difficulties. How did you navigate that in the early years of your work with Tyson?
For me, how I navigated that is that I just continue to learn. I made a lot of mistakes. I failed fast in this job, but I'm so grateful that the supervisors at Tyson, I was able to be transparent with them about my struggle of after incarceration. So being that one of the supervisors, her son was incarcerated as well. So she had a level of understanding what that was. So she gave me a little more grace than most people would have given me. But in that, after I completed my first 1-year anniversary of working there, I started now identifying that Tyson was a hub that so many other formerly incarcerated people were actually coming to apply for jobs. And I started seeing what I was able to survive, which means the panic attack and all these different things. I was starting to identify that individuals struggling with the same thing. So what I did, I started like journaling. I created a curriculum using my experience to be able to help others. And I presented it at that time to the management at Tyson Foods here in Columbia at the time, but they didn't buy into the system immediately, right? They didn't see the value in it. They didn't see it at that time until years later, after I eventually left Tyson Foods to move on and do what I'm doing now. I had an opportunity to go back to the headquarters at Tyson in Arkansas, I believe, and I was able to share with them some of my insight and what I saw. The company provided a second chance opportunity, but there were so many blind spots. One, because there was no consulting with the persons who have been in prison about what the challenges are. And I found that a lot of companies across the country had second chance opportunities, but their blind spot was having someone to help them navigate and create a more welcoming experience for those who are transitioning out of prison, right, into the workforce. We have seen that individuals who are transitioning out of prison, when you provide them with the tools that they need, which mean that emotional support that they need in that transitional period, which is I call that critical period of from 0 to 180 days. That's a very critical period for someone who's walking out of prison after whatever amount of years. And if a company provides a second chance hiring in that critical period, is not only that, but providing the other basic skills that we would have hoped that the prison would have provided for them. But unfortunately, the prison can't provide those lived experience because it isn't like it's a bubble. You know what I'm saying? The prison is a bubble, but when you walk into the world, the challenges are completely different than what you even can anticipate. So that's the blind spot I saw with Tyson and other companies. But I'm grateful that they gave me an opportunity to go to headquarters and speak to their entire team about those challenges. And hopefully they will continue to put the systems in place now to continue to support that workforce who are transitioning out of prison. Because I mean, great that they gave me an opportunity, but I believe that we can do so much more when we consult with those like me who have navigated this space to figure out what those blind spots are in your company.
Yeah, it's really interesting to me because hearing it from your end as an individual who experienced it, and then also hearing it in the recent article that you and I worked together on.
Yes,
Mark Peters here in Grand Rapids with Butterball Farms.
Butterball Farms, yeah.
Yeah, and then Dan Meyer down at Nehemiah Manufacturing. Both of them, from their end, being business leaders who supported it from that side of the equation, you all came to those same conclusions about what was needed to support someone and retain people, because there's always that risk of falling back into bad habits, getting back with the wrong crowd,
Mhm.
because it's what you've known, right? And
Yeah,
so it's really
absolutely.
breaking those old ties as well and providing that support. Like you said, the emotional support.
Mhm.
People, I'm sure, who aren't familiar with the topic never even think about that.
Mm. You
But I
really
just
do.
find it really interesting that the basic things that you list off are the same things that they, from their end of the experience, also discovered as needs that they
Yeah,
had to
and just
provide.
Jim, just also too, from observation and seeing it even to this very day is like what I do now, I help individuals in this transition through coaching is that I told you from 0 to 180 days is very critical for a person
Right.
transitioning.
Yep.
And you find an individual is able to land the job in their first 30 days of coming home. But what happens is that now help them with the psychology of money.
Mm.
And most people come from that environment, getting out of prison, they have needs. And the psychology of money for them is that once I get paid, I go party, right? So
Yep.
now like it's helping them understand that the psychology of how you saw money before incarceration is different today. You cannot make money, go party, and then don't show up for work, right?
Right.
So like even
Yep.
those simple things of showing them how to change the psychology of how they view money, and helping a company see that if you invested in this person for employment and you done went through all of these periods, you've then wasted a lot. I want to say what you have invested a lot of money in this person. So
Yeah.
teaching them how to show up after a paycheck, it's important because we will assume that someone already know this, but you're talking about someone who's coming from criminal behavior in the past, have went through a form of rehabilitation in prison, comes home. I call it the pre-contemplation stage of change. From 0 to 180 is called the pre-contemplation stage of change. You're still thinking about, man, should I stay on this right path that I know I need to stay on? But in order for you to stay upon that path, you have to change the psychology of money. You have to change the psychology and how you see life with employment. You know what I mean? And that's where, again, where a lot of companies have that blind spot. And it's the reason why is because no one like myself have been consulted, and now we have an opportunity to share this now. So teaching a person how to make an investment, what's the 401k that comes with the company? What is the stock option that a company provides, that how to set up an investment account with your paycheck. These are simple math things that most people who are coming into that workforce don't have no idea on what's there, So that's what I mean by adding value to that person. Because when you add that value, that person becomes a very loyal person. And now you're looking at that person staying in your workforce for years, not just for a 30-day paycheck.
Yep. Which I also heard from Dan and Mark. It is interesting. Mark himself specifically said the exact same thing you just said, that in his early days, he would have people who would come in and be very regular employees for a couple of weeks, and then they wouldn't show up. And he found out, because they wanted to go have a beer, and one beer turned into two, and the rest is history.
Yeah, the psychology of money and psychology of just knowing what it looks like after incarceration.
Well, and so you learned yourself what that looks like, and then something prompted you to write about it and teach others. What was it that made you look beyond yourself?
When I got out of prison, one of my mentors told me, like, everything that I go through to document it, because it will become a story for someone else. So even while I was in prison, I journaled, and even after my incarceration, I journaled. So he encouraged me the day one that I got out of prison to journal my first 30 to my first 180-day challenges, because he always felt like I should be able to use my story to teach it. So it took me some years to write the book called The 5 Keys to Reentry, which is the handbook for those after incarceration, because I started noticing a pattern, not only with the people I work with, but I also noticed a pattern within me. And that's that institutionalized thinking. And a friend of mine told me, like, it takes about 5 years for you to really find your footing after incarceration. I was like, nah, I don't believe that, because I was moving at a certain pace and I was accomplishing something. But when I got at that 5-year mark, I was like, he was right. It takes about 5 years for you to really break away from the institutional control movement structure that you have. You know what I'm saying? So I wrote this book to really highlight, after being out of prison for 10 years. Now I can show you how I've been able to broke all of the statistical records as it relates to a person getting out of prison, serving 22 years. That just led me to writing this book to really help people really get clarity on what it looks like to be walking out of prison, from goal setting to self-care, like really taking care of yourself after prison. And what that looks like is just learning how to be alone, learning how to walk in nature, learning how to find something that will allow you to decompress after being in a very stressful environment like prison. And then from prison, you go into a workforce environment that now adds a whole different level of stress. And how do you decompress by not using alcohol or drugs that can jeopardize your situation? So that's really what the book's about, is showing you how to set realistic goals, from the power of prayer life after incarceration to being self-compassion. What does self-compassion looks like after prison? Being mindful of those things. And I just share like what I call the 5 keys that has helped me in my transition. I use it to coach other men and women in their transition. I just decided to now put it into a book that will empower individuals in this period, but also for like organizations that are hiring. Like, this would be a great book for a manager to read who has a workforce, that they can now understand some of these challenges so that they can make it more relatable when they're doing orientation, when they're speaking to that group of individuals that they're hiring. It should be a great book to pass in your orientation process is a book, and I'm just promoting that right now. I just thought about it.
That's all right. Yeah, please do. I will have a link to the book. I'll have a link to the book in the show description, because you should be promoting it. Yeah.
I just thought about that. That would be something great for individuals to really just understand what that looks like. Yeah. But also going back again to like Butterball, those companies that you mentioned in the article, like thinking about what are the other resources available to help empower these individuals, because from the article, you can see where they say that they are making an impact, right? Because they made the investment. A lot of companies have to understand that you already making an investment when you hire these people. You take them through all of these processes. Now, why drop them off? The investment mean I want to return on my investment. And that means even taking it to the next level to me to help this person, because the return on the investment may be, this person may be at this company for the next 10 years that will help you expand your business, because they now feel a sense of belonging and feel like this is a part of a family other than just a workplace.
Yeah. Well, and I come at it from that manufacturing lens because that's my area of coverage, but it's true across the board. We're in a situation now where it's not really just a luxury anymore. We don't have the numbers to replace the retiring baby boomers. So where do you go to expand the workforce? It's in these people like yourself, who unfortunately in the past we have kept out, we've barred. And I mean, that was dumb at the time, but it's even dumber today when we literally don't have the people we need to run our operations.
Yeah. And that, we're looking at it right now when you're talking about how much 650,000 people are released yearly. And they're being denied for employment only because of a felony conviction. So this is, again, why I think that manufacturing, a lot of organizations need to be redefining their hiring process, but also getting information like we're sharing on this podcast now, speaking to people who have these lived experiences to figure out what systems we need to put in place, because this population, I mean, there's a population of people that are retiring, and they were going into their years of retirement. And now this is a big gap. When you got 650,000 people are walking out of prison, not including those who have never been to prison but have the felony conviction, how do we bring them into this manufacturing? Because we know that manufacturing is like the blood of our country. But if we don't have the individuals to fill into the workforce, then we have no blood flowing in this country, and we cannot continue to be a great country when it comes down to manufacturing and producing, because the workforce. So the policy has to change, and that starts from the top up all the way down to the bottom. And how do we not only hire, but how do we create an environment that will really produce great people that will be a contributor to our society? And once you give them that job, I always say this is almost like a domino effect. When you hire a man or woman after incarceration, what do? You change you change that person's family, because that man has children in the community. They're paying taxes now. Eventually they will become a homeowner. They purchase a car. So you're adding an economic value. So for instance, right, Jim, I always look at it like this too. You look at a community where you find people who are walking out of prison from impoverished communities. Yep. If you hire 10 or 15 people from that environment, right, that has a felony, they've been blocked out of employment. You hire 10 to 15 people, and you're looking at they're making between $35,000 to $45,000 a year, starting for the first couple of years. That's almost $500,000 going back into that community, which now reverses it reverses the crime rate. I always say that the way to addressing crime in a lot of the impoverished communities, Black and brown communities, is that we have to think about stimulating economically. We stimulate economically by not blocking people out from employment, but giving them job opportunities, giving them that opportunity. Because now, guess what? A family that was going with only making $20,000 a year through working at a fast food restaurant, now they're making $45,000. That changes the trajectory of that family's dynamics now, right? So that's the benefit that companies get. And I think that's how you package that. You package that in a way like we're not only hiring one person, we're changing the entire community structure when we hire people like that. People
for sure, yeah. And you look at it, from just the societal viewpoint of how wrongheaded it was, and you referred to that of locking people out of meaningful employment. But then the other thing is you've paid your price to society. Why do we think we have to layer on additional punishment beyond your sentence? That to me makes no sense. And it's destructive, like you say, of the community, not just of, harming the person who arguably, committed that infraction, but everyone around them. How on earth does that make sense?
But that was the whole intent when we look at prisons and why prison was created. Prison was created to rehabilitate, right? So we believe in a system when we started, we believe in a system as taxpayers. We believe that the prisons were initially created to rehabilitate. So if we believe that, we should trust and believe that the prison system, this person has served this amount of time, he or she is rehabilitated. They should be able to acclimate back into the world. And one way that you acclimate back into the world is through finding employment. That's the basic necessity for all of us to survive. That's the bloodline for all of us. When there's no opportunity for employment, then what happens? You find recidivism, you find crime, you find individuals, families are broken. Children are raised without fathers and mothers. You find educational structures are broken. And you look at, as I said, not to make this too much into color, but when we look at a lot of the Black and brown community, you find the community that were impacted the most by criminal or incarceration. You look at the community, you look at that because if it's a parent home and that father has a criminal record or the mother has a criminal record, they have to live in very impoverished situations because they're not making enough money. And then I'll say this and I'll stop here, is that when I said the 48,000 collateral consequences tied to a person's felony, that even denies people housing, Jim. Like people with a felony conviction can't even rent an apartment, right? So now I have a job, I have a steady income coming in, but guess what? Some places don't even allow me to rent because of a felony conviction. So now that's another hurdle that companies need to be mindful of, because now when you see that this person is not able to be to work on time, that person might be sleeping in a shelter, that person might be sleeping in their car, might be sleeping at a bus stop, but they're trying to rebuild their lives by attending this particular job. So again, when you hire, be mindful of those collateral consequences, but also do what I call a needs assessment. Really act for companies. I think that's something that needs to be a part of the applications, the needs assessment, like understanding if you know this person is coming from incarceration, do a needs assessment. Are you shelterly challenged right now? You have transportation. Do you have a bus pass? Do the bus route run in the same route from your home to the job? How many hours would it take for you to get on a bus? All of these needs assessment. So now you can factor all of these things in. And I say this, Jim, like when I was at this company, they hired this guy that got out of prison with me at the same time. He was not fortunate as I did to have a car. So he had to catch a bus and they put him on a 5:30 shift. But the buses don't run at 5:30 in the morning here in South Carolina, right? So he would have to try to walk to work or hitchhike to work or stay over somewhere in that area homeless in order to attend work. So that's what I mean by doing a needs assessment. When you know individuals are transitioning from prison back into the workforce, that needs assessment helps you understand that even though we have an opening in the morning, this person may not be the best person for it, because we're going to carry you to the training. We're going to invest money in you. And within 30 days, we're going to have to fire you, not because you didn't show up. You didn't show up on time, but there's no bus route running from this person where they stay to that point. So that's why I said need assessment is so valuable.
Yeah. And you mentioned in our discussion for the article as well, similar to that, the need to have time to meet with your parole officer, potentially. Things we don't think about with our average workforce, but are absolutely critical to folks who've come out of prison. Before we move on, I did want to mention, you mentioned family, and I saw on LinkedIn right before we got on here, you were doing a seminar on reintegrating with the family, which is also critical.
Yeah, I do what is called the five ways to support your loved one after incarceration. I do a workshop on that because family members, they need to understand the challenges of that person walking back into their houses, their home. A mother who is welcoming her son back into her household after been gone for 10 years is not the same John that was 18. That person is now 35 years old. And in prison, he experienced a whole lot that he would never tell you, because it's just the trauma we stuff in prison. We don't share, we stuff. So I do this workshop just to educate family on what these dynamics look like and how you can support that one, being able to identify institutional thinking, identify certain habits that a person does. Because your son gets up at 4:30 in the morning and goes sit outside on the porch. That's a condition. That's part of him weaning him or her dealing with incarceration. If you see them sitting down eating a certain way, their backs can't put their backs at a certain place, or they go in their room and they shut their doors. All of those are small indications that this person is eventually moving through this transitional period from incarceration. Too many people think that when a person walks out of prison that they automatically are normal again. No, you're not. You're not normal because you have been in a controlled environment for so long. So that's what my workshop's about, educating like agency leaders, people who are working with fathers and mothers. What are the signs that you need to pay attention to, and how you support your loved one after incarceration outside of getting them a job, but helping them get professional counseling. If that person has the children at the house, how do you slowly acclimate that person back into their children's life after incarceration? So those are the various things that I deal with. I share in these various workshops that I do around the country as it relates to just prison as a whole, returning back home from prison.
Now, so you got Path to Redemption. That's absolutely a resource, and I'll have a link to that in the description as well. Your books, I'll have links to those. Have you found other resources, whether for the individuals coming out of prison or the companies that might be looking to hire people re-entering?
I mean, right here in South Carolina, like I said, I wish there was more companies. I'm glad that you, in that article you shared about Butterball Farm, I never knew that. And someone else who read that, I was like, I never knew these two companies that actually does that. So I think that's a great resource, because depending upon what part of the country a person is, the resources varies, right? And it's unfortunate. Like people come home now, they hear me talk about Tyson Foods so often, they be like, hey, could you help me get a job at Tyson Food? I said, unfortunately, Tyson is not in South Carolina anymore, right? So it's like we still have a lot of work we need to do, Jim, around companies coming into these various states, understanding like the tax break. I know that there was always a tax break that come with companies that provide second chance opportunities. And I think that a lot of states can do better at educating new businesses that want to come into a state about what are some of the tax breaks and benefits that come with creating a workforce for formerly incarcerated people. You know, there's a lot. And I think that, you know, we have, like right now in South Carolina, we have two major manufacturing companies coming into South Carolina. And now I'm like really pushing the leaders here in South Carolina to say, hey, let's set up a meeting with these manufacturing companies that are here. Like, how could they incorporate a second chance workforce? Like, how do they create that? And they're here now, so it's not even about the tax break, but how do you create a second chance workforce? Because you're going to spend millions of dollars on building this manufacturing company, but guess what you're going to realize is that the workforce is going to be slim, right? And you have a population of people here that can utilize this job and benefit from it. But a lot of people, it's a blind spot. Most companies come in to a community, they're not thinking about that part of the workforce. They're only thinking about, we build it, they're going to come. Yes, some people are going to come, but your policy may prevent some people from entering into the workforce because of that. So right now, I just think that Jim, we just have to like really focus on educating what you're doing through your podcast and your articles, like educating the business world about why it's so important to rethink how they go about a hiring so that they can continue to be a resource for these various populations of people that are in the community that are seeking employment, but are really struggling for that employment. All they need is a second chance. And I'm grateful for companies like Tyson that gave me a chance, and so many of my friends when they got out of prison, because now we're taxpayers, we're homeowners, we're business owners as a result of just being able to give us that job at the time that they did.
Very well said. Is there anything we haven't covered that
get
out there?
I
covered a lot of ground.
Hey, man, I appreciate it. It's always a pleasure chatting with you, man. It's just that, I'm passionate as well as you're passionate about the work that we both do. And it's just really man, I just really want companies to really just take the time to reassess, man. We're in 2000 going into 2025, and a lot of companies cannot continue to operate the way that we operated 30 years ago when it came down to the workforce. The workforce is dwindling down. We find less and less people are developing certain trades and skill set that is going to continue to push this workforce. So if we love this country, which we all claim we love America, we know that America is great is because of the businesses in America. And we have to continue to find ways to employ the American people. And that is also looking at not just hiring them in prison. That's a whole nother conversation, right, Jim?
Yeah.
Because you find companies hire people inside of prison. These major companies go into prison, but even when you come out of prison, you can't even apply for that job that you worked for while you was in prison. And I think that we need to change a lot of these policies as it relates to hiring people so that we can continue to be the country that we are. And it starts again from the bottom, and that's manufacturing small grassroots organizations, building and working with organizations to continue to empower the people.
Well said, and I couldn't agree more, Lester. I appreciate you coming on today.
Appreciate you, Jim, and I look forward to talking to you soon, sir. Soon.
Absolutely. We'll definitely stay in touch. Should have mentioned Jeffrey Korzanik said the exact same thing you did in the conclusion of my article about what worked 30, 40, 50 years ago will not work today. So we do have to change, and you nailed that. So you got Jeff out there doing his work, and I think maybe I'll have to follow up on this show and try to figure out ways to highlight some of those resources around the country. So there's more work to do. I know you're going to be after it. I'll jump on board as well.
You be blessed, man. And I would say this, that we can't what's called the ostrich syndrome. The ostrich is when they see problems, they bury their heads in the sand. As manufacturing businesses, we can't keep burying our heads in the sand expecting this problem to go away. People are retiring, and there's a major gap in the workforce, and we can't say, we don't want to address this issue right now. This has continued to be a real issue. And I think that those companies that begin addressing that, and I'm not just saying we hire, but Jim, really being intentional about how we go about the hiring, speaking with people like you and myself and Jeff, how do we actually start creating system SOPs that begin this process of hiring so that when we bring these individuals into this workforce, we focus on the holistic, the entire person, the entire being, so that they will be with us for the next 10 years, 15, 20 years. They retire from us because they have a sense of belonging and you took care of their needs as individuals.
Perfectly said. A wonderful wrap up.
Hey, I'll speak to you soon, man.
Yep.
Be blessed, man.
You too. And of course, as always, thanks to you in the audience. You are why we're here. We're here at least every Tuesday and now even Thursdays. So tune in on those days and we'll have new shows for you. They will not all be as important and critical as the message that Lester brought to us today, but they're all going to be at least a little critical and important. So tune in. Signing off from Manufacturing Talks. Lester Young, Jim Vanosky. So long.
Take care.
Thanks for tuning in to Manufacturing Talks with Jim Vanosky. Watch for new episodes dropping every Tuesday. Don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe.